Let's start with a word of prayer. Our dear, loving Heavenly Father, thank you for allowing us to gather together on this Shabbat and pray together, sing together, and learn together. And Lord, so I ask a special blessing that the words I say are the words that you want, not what I want. And I thank you for each and every one who's here tonight and for give them a blessing, whatever the issues they're having, and guide us in each step of our day as we witness to other people. In your name, in the name of your son, amen. So tonight I wanted to talk about the Haftarah. Last night, so if you follow the Chabad, they do not Nassau this week, but if you follow other ones, they did it last week. And Chabad does special readings, and many Orthodox do a special reading for Shavuot, and so they just push it. A lot of times they'll call it Nassau too, but we don't often do the Haftarah, and I want to talk about why it's done, when it's done, where and how it came from, because the understanding the Haftarah is very important. And when we look at it, some people ask, is it the Haftarah or half Torah? Well, it actually has nothing to do with the Torah other than the fact that it's taught at the same time. And it is pronounced different depending on if you're Sephardic or if you're Ashkenazi. I pronounce it an Ashkenazi style because that's the way I was taught, Haftarah. But Sephardic is Tararh, Haftarah. Little bit different pronunciation. But when we look at it, the Torah, we first have to compare the Haftarah to the Torah. And the Torah is obviously the 5 books of Moses. We all know that. It includes the history and the law. It is a foundation for the entire Bible, including the Brit Kadishah, the Newer Testament, if you will. A typical Torah scroll is 162 feet. Now, this is based on a standard, I'm not talking about a temple Torah scroll, but a typical, the ones that we use at BSB, the length of that is 162 feet. Can anybody tell me how many parashat there are? How many parshas to a Torah scroll? Anybody know?
This is Mark here. You asking me for the regular, or are you including special Haftarahs for Yom Tov and for special time?
Just the regulars. Just the regular, Mark.
Well, it would be normally the same connected with the, at least, I would say at least 52 or 53, depending on how it's done.
Typically, it's 54. So then, but the Haftarah is quite a bit different. It is primarily from the writings of the prophets, but not exclusively to the writings of the prophets. It had 2 of the Haftarah come from the book of 1 Kings. Several of them come from the Psalms. Now, the Psalms are primarily done during the festival season that they do the Haftarah. And to compare the distance, a Torah scroll is 162 feet. The longest scroll of the prophets is Isaiah scroll, and that's only 24 feet long. So the prophets are very relatively short in distance. Now, where did the Haftarah originate? Well, this is an interesting thing. The first actual documentation of the Haftarah, I should ask Mark this question, but I'll answer it. The first actual written documentation of the Haftarah is in Luke 4:16 through 19. And it said, he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up. We're speaking about, obviously, Jesus. He went to the synagogue on the Sabbath, as was his custom. He stood up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him. He unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written, The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has appointed me to bring good news to the poor. He sent me to proclaim the release of the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. Now, I added the Isaiah 62, 1 and 2. That's not in, if you look in Luke, it doesn't tell you where it comes from, but that is where it comes from. There's a couple things about this thing that are important to those of us who believe in Yeshua as a Messiah. First off, it says he came to the synagogue as was his custom, right? And not only that, it says he stood up to read. Mark, how many people in a synagogue are called up for Aliyah?
Usually 7.
So, typical, even in Jesus's day, they call on the people, and the people that they call on, they start with the Kohan, then they go to the Levites, and of course, in Jesus' time, there would have been Levites to do it, and they move their way on down through the different people. And it's a very select group. They don't just let anybody step up and talk. And in a synagogue today, if you go in, they'll give you a little card and tell you what number you are. If you're in a large synagogue, not in a small one. The second actual written documentation is found in Acts 13, 14 through 16. And on the Sabbath day, we're speaking about Paul, obviously. Well, not obviously, you guys would know that. We're speaking about Paul. And on the Sabbath day, they went into the synagogue and sat down. After the reading of the law and the prophets, the officials in the synagogue sent them a message saying, brothers, if you have any word of exhortation for the people, give it. So Paul stood up and with a gesture began to speak. So this is an interesting text because it adds the third leg of a service. Normally you have a reading of the law. You have 7 people typically, if you have a large synagogue, that get up and do each of the aliyahs. And then you have another person come up and do the prophets. And then you have a person who expounds on what was read that day. There is no documentation earlier than this that shows that the prophets were the Haftarah was used. So where did it originate from? Well, the common understanding is there is some belief that it may have started during the time of Nehemiah and Ezra, as it was the first time that a public reading of the Torah was recorded. However, there is no documentation of that. Is simply academic speculation, because prior to that time, there is no recording of anybody getting up and reading Torah either. But of course, you remember they stood up in the square and read the Torah. The other common belief is it started under the Hasmonean rule, as a reading of the Torah was prohibited. So if you remember, the Greeks controlled it. They did not allow the reading of the Torah. And as a result, we have a Hanukkah tradition. Does anybody know what that tradition is? What toy do we play with?
Dreidel.
Oh, of course, we use the dreidel, of course, with the letter on each side. And it depends on whether it's a regular dreidel or Israeli dreidel. Because the Israeli dreidel says a great miracle happened here versus the other dreidel, a great miracle happened there. That's the only difference. Thank you.
So that is one of the things that they believe started because of the Greeks not allowing it. The third one, which has a lot of weight, is that it was instituted against the Samaritans, who denied the canonicity of the prophets, except for Joshua. They believed in Joshua, and later against the Sadducees. And the reason I say this one actually carries weight, because if you remember at the woman at the well, when Jesus was talking to that woman, he said, what you know what you know, but the truth comes from the Jews, right? Because they didn't believe in the prophets. And Jesus adds that weight that it comes from the Jewish people, not from the Samaritans. And the Sadducees also didn't carry the weight into the of the prophets. Now, I want to recap because the parsha what is not so. And in a nutshell, it talked about the Levites being counted between 30 and 50 who do the work of transporting it. If you remember, we talked about this list last week, so I just want to recount it. God gives to Moses the law of Sotah, the wayward wife, suspected of unfaithfulness. The law of Nazir is given. The blessing over the people is given by Aaron, and the leaders of the 12 tribes bring identical blessing. This week, the Haftarah is about Nazir. And specifically to remind you, a Nazir, a man or a woman who sets themselves apart by making a Nazirite vow to abstain for the sake of the Lord. They are not allowed to eat any product of the grapevine. And this includes grape seeds, grape leaves, grapeseed oil, raisins, jam, vinegar, and wine. So all those things are prohibited to use. And what is involved, of course, remember they have to take the vow, which can vary in length. You can take this Nazirite vow for a month, or it can be for a lifetime. They're not allowed to cut their hair or come in any contact with a dead person. The individual then spends their time attempting to draw closer to God. And Amos 2:11 states, I raised up prophets from among your sons and Nazirites from your young men. Now, upon completion of the vow, they must bring a specific offering. They have to shave their head, place it under the fire under the peace offering, which is brought, and they have to bring a sin offering as well, which you'd say if you're not sinning, but we talked about that last week in detail. Here's the Haftarah. The Haftarah comes from Judges 13:2-25. This week's Haftarah describes the birth of Samson, a lifetime Nazirite. Manoah and his wife, members of the tribes of Dan, were childless. One day, an angel appeared to Manoah's wife, and informing her that she will give birth to a child. This child, the angel instructed, was to be a lifetime Nazirite. In addition, the angel instructed her to abstain from all foods forbidden to a Nazirite, such as wine, any product, grapes, or ritually impure food, from the moment she would conceive. The angel further informed the woman that her son will save the Jewish people from the Philistines. Manoah and her wife offered a sacrifice to God, and the angel then ascended to heaven in the flames that devoured the sacrifice. The Haftarah ends with the birth of Samson, and the lad grew and God blessed him. Now, I let quite a bit out of this, but there's a couple things that I wanted to bring to your attention. First off, did Samson take this vow? No, he did not. His mother didn't even take the vow. She was told she had to do that because she was barren. She hadn't been able to have a kid. The angel appeared to her. And it's interesting. Nowhere in this section of Judges does her name ever show up. It says the wife of, and Manoah isn't given any time at all. The angel comes to her, but we don't know her name. Another thing that's interesting about this is the fact that I left out a little bit, but the time to talk to her, and this time her husband was there, and they offered to feed the individual, the angel, and the angel said no, offer a sacrifice of a goat, and then when that goat was burned up. So here we have two a Torah portion and a Haftarah that actually have a link together. A lot of times those don't link together. I have a question for you. Have anybody here looked at which parsha goes with each Haftarah? And if you have you found that quotation from Isaiah 61:1-2? Anybody? Well, that's because and my thing here is, why is the Haftarah Yeshua read not found in the current Haftarahs? Well, there's some interesting discussion about that, because we need to look at some other verses first. And so I'm going to need some of you guys to read, because I didn't bother to put these in because I figured we need to use our Bibles. So the first one is Isaiah 61, 1 and 2. I've got 7 of them. So I am going to show them all, and you can pick one that you want to read. That should be it. There we are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Who wants to read Isaiah 61, 1 and 2?
The Spirit of the Lord God is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me. He has sent me as a herald of joy to the humble, to bind up the wounded of heart, to proclaim release to the captives, liberation to the imprisoned, to proclaim a year of the Lord's favor, and a day of vindication by our God, to comfort all who mourn.
Okay, so that's Isaiah 61. That is the one Yeshua read from the Haftarah when they gave him the scroll of Isaiah. Now, if you read it in most modern New Testament versions, it says he rolled to the place. Well, it's 24 feet long. Not likely that he rolled very far one way or another. And I can show you how it came to be on that particular one. But let's go to Isaiah 7:14. Anybody?
Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, a virgin will be with child and bear a son, and she will call his name Emmanuel.
Okay, so here's another verse, and it is referring directly to what all Christians say point to Yeshua. Isaiah 52:13.
Behold, my servant will prosper. He will be high and lifted up and greatly exalted.
Okay. Isaiah 42, 1 to 4.
Behold, my servant whom I uphold, my elect one in whom my soul delights. I have put my spirit upon him. He will bring forth justice to the Gentiles. He will not cry out nor raise his voice, nor cause his voice to be heard in the street. A bruised reed he will not break, and smoking flax he will not quench. He will bring forth justice for truth. He will not fail, nor be discouraged till he has established justice in the earth, and the coastland shall wait for his law.
Okay, and now we go to some of the smaller prophets. Hosea 11:20. Hosea 11:20.
Hosea 11 doesn't go to 20, it stops at 12.
Oh, you know what? Hang on a minute. Probably because I looked it up in a JPS. Okay, it is 11 verse 12.
Ephraim has surrounded me with lies, and the house of Israel with deceit. But Judah still walks with God and is faithful to the Holy One.
Go to Zechariah 9:9. I'll explain it in a little bit why they use that verse.
Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter of Jerusalem. Lo, your king comes to you. Triumphant and victorious is he, humble and riding on an ass, on the colt of a foal of an ass.
So obviously that was fulfilled by Yeshua. And last one, Malachi 3:1.
Behold, I'm sending my messenger to clear the way before me, and the Lord whom you seek shall come to his temple suddenly. As for the angel of the covenant that you desire, he is already coming.
Right. So all of these verses used to be included in the Haftarah in different places. Any idea why they're no longer included?
Because they all refer to Yeshua.
Exactly, because they either have a reference to being used in the New Testament, or they specifically are used by Christians to prove And so they deleted them out of the Haftarah. Now, how do I know that? I'm not just making that statement out of ignorance, because does everybody know what a Genza is? The Cairo Genza, I'll explain it to you. A Genza is a storage area in a synagogue or a cemetery designated for the storage of worn out Torah scrolls or Hebrew language books and papers on religious topics prior to proper cemetery burial. So if you get a Torah scroll that's too worn to be read by a child, that's the ruling for reading a Torah scroll. A child has to be able to read it if it's foreign. Then they put it in a Genza, and that's where they store it. Well, this Genza in Cairo, they found it's actually located in Ben Ezra Synagogue in Cairo, Egypt. And this isn't really a new find. This was found quite a while back, but they included manuscripts from the 6th through the 19th century. They also included lists of Haftarah. There was 400,000 manuscripts written in this Genza in Hebrew, Arabic, and Aramaic. In this Genza, they had several lists of Haftarah, and these Haftarah were all part of the original Haftarah that were used in the 1st century. And after that, they got written out largely because of Christianity. Haftarah are very important because it allows us, Haftarah allows us to understand the Torah and remind us of the goodness of God and that God has a plan. Now, if you want to, the Brit Kadishah or the New Testament, Richard Elliford wrote about this. He did all of the work on it and starts in Leviticus for Mark 1 and works its way through all of the 54 Haftarahs. Why is that? Well, because Mark traveled with Paul, but then he also spent time with Peter, and he was a very much a avid observant Jew, and they believe that he wrote the book of Mark. And I think it's important when we study the Torah that we take time to read the Haftarah and understand how it relates, and we read the Brit Kadishah. Now, when you look at any messianic listing, I've seen lots of different verses that they use because they try to align whatever it's talking about with what the Torah talks about in the Haftarah, and they try to find something in the New Testament. That's why they have a different listing. Is that right or wrong? No, it doesn't. Either one is good. Yeah,
Can I interject for a moment as well as the Messianic readings? Because in the complete Jewish Bible, that is the standard Bible I use, we have a set in the back when it lists all the readings for both the regular portion for Yom Tov and for special fast days. There is a listed Messianic reading. In some places, you have to look on a Messianic Jewish calendar, and a lot of places, depends on what your Messianic rabbi tells you. If they tell you at all about the Haftarah readings and or the Brit Hadashah for that matter. So I just wanted to make mention, in each setting it differs. It's not uniform form or universal like the regular Torah reading and the Haftarah reading, which is universally recognized throughout the world, Israel and beyond. So I just wanted to make a comment on that. Thank you.
Yeah. No, that's what I was discussing, Mark, and you're right in what you said. But even if we look at the Haftarah and the Torah, if we look at a Sephardic versus a Ashkenazi, you'll see that they line up differently. And different synagogues, if you look at Chabad, uses a different one than many other synagogues. So, but they've become very much regimented. So I would hope that if you take time to read a Torah section, you take time to read the Haftarah. It's usually short, usually anywhere from a couple verses to, I don't think there's very many over a chapter. Take that time because it fleshes out what the thought is. I hope that this helps you a little bit to understand what it is and why we should be using them. Now, one other thing I want to talk about, Torah readings can be done in 1 year, which is what we've done. We've done it 11, 12 years now in a row on a yearly basis. But many synagogues have gone to a 3-year process of going through the Torah. Obviously, you don't get through a complete parsha, but some of these parshas we could do over and over. But then you have 150 plus chances to read the Haftarah. So there's lots of ways to read the Bible. There's no hard and fast rule, but going through the Torah gives a foundation to everything that you do. We can see that Yeshua believed it. Paul definitely believed it. All of the apostles followed the same format in what they did. So hopefully you're able to do that as well.